of the show, Mark Bichachi, communication consultant, as well as Gloria Oruoba, who is a youth policy analyst. Now we're going to start off in neighboring Tanzania, where we're having a bit of a snafu when it comes to the election that happened on Wednesday. The opposition leader Tundu Lissu said he is not going to recognize anything that happened between Wednesday and the day he spoke. That was the next day on Thursday. So I would like to shine focus on some of the issues that have come up during this election period. We've had an internet blockage, we've had restrictions in messaging and communication, we have had the international press being barred. That happened a while ago, from covering local developments. And of course, when there is a lack of communication flow, a lot of questions are asked about the free and fairness of a process that is ongoing, because what is being hidden, that is the biggest question. So I'll throw this one over to Mark Bichachi. Tanzania has been known for its seamless elections, no violence. They campaign, colorful language, but at the same time very on issues. And if you look at how Magufuli was previously elected, the campaign was pretty interesting to watch. Now, when you see what's happening now, it's a sharp contrast. What comes to mind?
Trix, I have the vantage point of having worked in Tanzania in the political scene, and B, having political relations in Tanzania. I know a lot of the politicians quite well. So my view is slightly different. Number one is that CCM has used its hegemony for a long time to suppress the efforts of Chadema as a party. This of course was not as bad as it is now, but Chadema has faced issues like the party funds being delayed, being issued to them, oppression of its members, and things like that. So that has happened. But what has happened over the last 4 or 5 years of Magufuli rule is that, number one, Magufuli has systematically shut down free speech in Tanzania. The freedom that was there 5 years ago, when I go back to talk to my friends, there's a lot more fear. We've seen media houses being shut down for 3-4 days at a time. We've seen in fact, there was a Tanzanian politician who was shot for his views against Magufuli, and he was treated in Nairobi hospital and later in London. We know that there have been very many political players in opposition who've been arrested and been accused of financial impropriety under the Terrorism Act, and have been held without trial for a year, 2 years at a time. So Magufuli has turned out to be a full dictator in Tanzania, and what the Kenyans are now witnessing in this particular election, and why Chadema is up in arms, is simply because Magufuli is strong-arming the politics of Tanzania. What is different, though, is that CCM, of course, enjoys a large amount of support in the country, simply because of Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. In fact, a lot of the time in Tanzania, when they have a crisis, and they've had epic crises. You know, sometimes I hear Kenyans complaining about our corruption. I'm like, you should take a trip to Tanzania. What they would do is play clips of Nyerere to remind people that CCM is still the party of independence. And so you find that, and there was a recent IMF document that said even the economic growth that Magufuli is bragging about might not be the reality, because he's suppressed business quite a bit. So there's a lot that is amiss in Tanzania, and I'm kind of glad that it's coming to the fore, because my prediction is Magufuli will try to name himself a lifetime president. You just wait and see.
Oh, Gloria, do you agree with that analysis?
I agree with that, and I actually think, I'm glad that Mark has talked about the irregularities that are happening within the process of their election. You know, we've seen them being shut down. Literally, the internet was shut down because they're understanding that, Africans are starting to get the information that they need through those internet spaces, through their friends in the diaspora. So, people say when Kenya coughs or catches a cold, the whole of East Africa gets sick.
Yeah.
So people have woken up realizing that actually this is what government is supposed to do for us. And so, you know, our elections are becoming a bit more, you know, the citizens are demanding for more. They're not just going to listen to the usual songs of, you know, when I come in, I'm going to bring peace. When I come in, I mean, they're like, no, what more do you really have? You know, let's talk about economic empowerment. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. So I think there was a realization by Magufuli. And if you ask me, anybody who imagines that they can shut down the internet or, you know, create those barriers from people not getting the message that they need to get in order to make an informed decision on who they are voting for, they've already lost. So for me, whether or not he wins, he's already lost, because he clearly understands that people have lost faith in him, and that's why, you know, they're all this, we call it state machinery. He's using a lot of state machinery to ensure that his opponent doesn't get a fair chance. So, and we've seen already that his opponent has already said, you know, they are not accepting the results that are being channeled since yesterday. So, and that's what we really need to talk about. How do we create a conducive and fair environment to carry out elections such that, you know, it's like a game. If I participate in this game and I feel like we all got an equal chance, you know, I got my chips where I should, you got, you know, the equal chips, and we all had a platform to communicate what we are going to bring to this country. We all were subjected to the same kind of treatment in terms of, you know, if it's hosting rallies, nobody was being shot out of their rallies, or, you know, no rallies were being shut down and others encouraged. If there is a fair chance in how, step by step, from campaigns down when we get closer to elections, throughout the election period, whether it's 2-3 days, throughout the counting, if everything is transparent and we are being fair, and the regulations that we are supposed to follow are being followed by all participants, then there's less chance of one side of the divide saying, you know, I don't accept those results. And we've seen it in the past. The things that are being witnessed in Tanzania are exactly what we witnessed in 2007, 2008 in terms of, you know, we want to transparency in how you're carrying out, you're counting those polls. We talked about there's a time people were demanding open the servers because now you've seen there's a hiccup. Right. So that transparency and being able to show that every other player of this game has an equal and fair chance, that is the only thing that is going to bring Africans and, you know, even here in Kenya, to a point where I can participate in a competition and I can accept that I have lost. There's nothing else that will bring that kind of, you know, clarity in terms of accepting that I have lost, accepting that you know, my opponent actually has beat me out to this for whatever matters. Right. But transparency. Yeah.
Now, Mark, there's a running theme when it comes to the transitions that happen, the difficult transitions. Most of these leaders, even in Kenya, we've heard them saying, I have so much work that I've started and I would like you to give me the ticket so that I can be able to finish this off. And we've had that in previous regimes, and the current regime has certain undertones of a legacy. Now, when it comes to Tanzania, the president also at the same time has talked about the work he has done, the infrastructure, and that would be one of the reasons he would say, I would like to keep on working so that I can finish off what I've started. But when it comes to democracy, you have a certain time. A constitution says you have a certain amount of time, and therefore you must fashion your operations within that limited time. So as you predict, given your prediction of a lifetime president, what do you make of what's happening in Tanzania, and is that a good excuse to keep the ball rolling even though there are certain laws that are supposed to govern how we operate politically?
You know, Trix, one of the things that we need to understand and take it to heart very carefully is that African democracies are quite young.
Yes.
And number two, that we and Trump has shown us this, that if you elect someone who has disregard not only for the rule of law but for the ethos of an office, then they will abuse it. And this is something that I think the political scientists of today will begin to study, because who would have ever thought that the United States will have a president who has tried to personally, directly benefit from his office as president? And this is something, it's a phenomenon that is unheard of. Let's draw comparison between Donald J. Trump and John Pombe Magufuli, where they are both COVID deniers. They in fact, a lot of Kenyans cite Tanzania and they say, look, Tanzanians are not dropping dead on the streets, and therefore there is no COVID.
Yeah,
okay?
Well, officially they have only 509 cases since
exactly
April.
because they stopped. Yeah, because they stopped testing because Magufuli said they tested pineapples and pawpaws and they were also positive. And you can see that such kind of thinking, and this is called truth denialism, you know, where you look at the facts and you want to completely ignore the facts. The same thing that Trump does with climate change is the same thing that he does with COVID-19. And when you put that to a population, and you must understand that populations are gullible to their political leaders to a very high extent. Now, the question then is that political gullibility, and now I'll give you an example. If they take that to be true and they decide that Magufuli is a messiah because he invoked the name of Jesus in fighting COVID, and, you know, like Trump holding the Bible, there's a possibility that if you held a referendum and asked his supporters whether they wanted him or them to be presidents for life, there's a possibility they would say yes. And in a democratic context where they do a referendum and they want a lifetime leader, you know, you cannot really say that they've broken democracy. So there's a very dangerous path here that was blazed previously by Putin, but is slowly being used by other people. Look at the current leaders in Duterte, look at the Brazilian president, and you'll see there's a number of these people who are coming out, and they're trying to rule their countries using alternate truth, alternative facts, as they're called, and people are letting them get away with it. And for as long as that status quo remains, and I'm seeing a bit of it coming into Kenya, then you can be assured that with this kind of leaders, anything is possible.
Yeah.
And they'll change the constitution, and they'll be within the constitution when they rule forever.
Yes, politics as opposed to issue-based politics. Now, Gloria, young people are very gullible and vulnerable to certain enticements from politicians. Before you know it, you're having a leader that has nothing to do with what you need in mind. So when it comes to Kenya, do you see that sort of being a simmering situation as we head towards 2022? And what can the youth do to ensure that the people who are put in power, because they do have the power to place them there, are the right people?
I'm glad that Mark has talked about that there are legal loopholes where, you know, people can use the constitution and actually legally come in and change the constitution to suit their needs. Because that is the situation we are in Kenya. Huh? We are talking about a Building Bridges initiative that is attempting to change the constitution with a guise of, you know, trying to fix certain problems here and there that we have. And yet we all know why they are trying to change that constitution.
Do
you know?
we?
Yes, we do. We know very well that the real contextual matter there, we know very well, is about the expansion of the executive. So I'm glad that he has pointed it out with the neighbors, and, you know, and he's pointed it out by saying that, you know, we should not allow this because you never really know, and blah, blah, blah. My point here is there are so many problems that indeed we are facing as a country, whether it is divisive politics, whether it is economic bottlenecks that we need to put, whether it is even that issue of the 75% of this population, and we are about we're about 50 million Kenyans, according to the last census. So
a huge chunk of that youth.
Yes, that's a very huge number of youth who are unemployed. You know, we are talking about tribal, you know, tribal regions and tribal contests and things like that. All these things are there. Nobody is actually saying that they don't exist. Nobody is saying that they are not negatives of it. But when you look at what we are trying to do by bringing in this Building Bridges initiative and trying to say this is the document that is going to solve all these problems, and really what we are trying to do is change the constitution so that we can adopt an imperial presidency. You know, for me, then I start to wonder, is this really why is this really the direction that we are going to take?
Okay.
You asked me a question on the youth, so I want to get into that.
Hold that thought, Gloria. Yes, Mark.
Tricks, I have the right to reply because I've been taken completely out of context.
Yes.
And number two, that's the laziest taking out of context I've ever seen. Number one, there's no clause within the BBI that is talking about extension of any presidential term. Number two, you need to understand that you cannot create an imperial presidency by reducing how much money the executive has, and number two, by creating the position of a prime minister through whom a president must work.
He didn't really understand why he talked about that there are ways you can change
Let him make the point, then you can come back. Yeah.
Gloria, you misquoted me. I let you finish, so please have the same respect to allow me to finish. You see, this idea of an imperial presidency that the types of Gloria are trying to imagine out of their heads because the president can fire the prime minister. I want them to go look at constitutions of any country across the world, and there are over 100 countries that have a president and prime minister, and tell me which one where a duly elected president cannot fire a prime minister. And you see, this is the kind of lazy thinking that we try to throw out there to make Kenyans feel emotional about opposition. And I want to remind them that as we speak, John Pombe Magufuli's Tanzania has a prime minister position. So when I talk about a constitutional amendment, and let me tell you how people do power grabs and become lifetime presidents. They change the constitution and they remove the term clauses. If BBI has even a single clause, and I dare Gloria to show this to the Kenyan people, a single clause that states that there will be a lifetime president, instead of living within her nightmares, she sleeps at night and dreams something and decides.
No. We are not going to make this a personal
Mark, let's make it less personal and more about the issues, the contentious issues of the BBI. And Gloria, you brought that up, so let's just keep it rolling. Respond to that, but based on the document and why you feel.
I think my point here is, as the point that Bichache said, is that you can legally find ways to legally introduce something, whether it is to legally introduce a dynastic kind of leadership, whether it is to legally introduce an imperial president. My point is that you can actually go into the constitution, you can find a legal way, and you can, maneuver your way in there. But
tell us how
I have to.
Let her speak,
yes,
Mark. Yeah.
Bichache, I understand that you're very passionate about the Building Bridges initiative, but allow us. This is what I've been asking the task force. Allow us to air our views.
Go ahead, Gloria.
So my point here being, and by the way, just for purposes of record, I don't oppose the Building Bridges initiative. What I want to urge the youth, because really it is about the youth. We are the ones, this is our future that is being toyed around with. I want to urge the youth, as they're reading that document, as Bichache is encouraging us to read that document, there are three things that we must do. The first thing, read it and unpack it. Literally go through it, understand, okay, these are the positives. This is what maybe it's trying to solve. And then this is the things that I'm actually against, and I think we should have a conversation about that. And there are so many issues that we need to have those conversations. We had the deputy president raise those issues and ask pertinent questions. So at the end of the day, it's not even about opposing the Building Bridges initiative. We actually don't, personally, I don't really care about a referendum. If you ask me, I think that we should be pushing for a negotiated consensus. If you ask me, I think you should go to a boardroom, and most of those things, as I was reminded yesterday by my friend Fred Okango, when we had a debate and a sit down on the youth agenda with the BBI, I was reminded that the issues I was raising were mostly administrative. When I raised issues that the Building Bridges initiative is not really addressing economic empowerment to the T in terms of how they are going to actually create those jobs as a government, then I was told those are administrative issues. They are going to be sorted out by the Youth Council. I was told a lot of these issues are also legislative, that they can be passed in parliament. So my take here is, if these things can be done, don't bother us by trying to get us into a contest. Don't bother us by trying to heighten our emotions so that now you can divide us along, if it is the underserved communities versus the privileged or we don't really, right now our focus on as a youth, and I speak to a lot of
Gloria,
youth,
who in the political spheres right now is appealing more to the emotions of the people? Is it the pro-BBI people or the anti-BBI people?
I've sat in both forums. I actually was in Bomas. And I sat in there. I've sat in forums where it was pro-BBI and people were trying to educate me and sensitize me on what this document has. And I've also been on the other side trying to understand why would they have certain issues that they are strongly against or seem to appear that they are opposing BBI. I would say, when I sat in Bomas and I was surrounded by elected leaders, during the launch, and I saw elected leaders, older than me, senior citizens, stand up and shout down the deputy president, I would say those are the people who are trying to touch on the emotions of the underserved communities by saying we are not going to listen to you, we pass this thing, we move on, and things like that. And for me, I've actually, literally the last 3 days of reading through this document, engaging with my peers, Fred Okango, Ruth Ambogo, Mark Bichache through forums like this, and everyone from whatever political divide, I've come to the understanding that, yes, the issues that I keep raising about the youth are actually administrative, and some of them are legislative.
Yes.
So, if those things are administrative and legislative, you don't need to change our constitution to deal with some of them. And my question has always been, why don't you deal with those things and then come and tell us that in order for you to solve tribal politics or winner takes all, you're going to expand the executive or whatever. So for me, my point is, and I believe a lot of youth who are listening to me are with me, we actually don't care about a document. What we'd like to see is economic empowerment.
Change. Mark, do you agree with the fact that Gloria is insinuating that a referendum or a change in the constitution might not be so as necessary as is being deemed by the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga and the pro-BBI section of the political spheres? Is it unnecessary to change the constitution? Could these things be actually done without having to tinker with a document that has been deemed sacred?
Let me first state, Trix, that Gloria has failed to show how BBI will create an imperial president. She has failed to show. She has totally failed and ignored to show the country why she was saying that this is a Magufuli-like document.
That's not my mandate. Government is there to sensitize the people. That's not my mandate. It's not my mandate.
Let's not talk over each other because we won't have a debate. So, Mark, could you answer my question? Is it unnecessary to change the constitution?
Answer the question.
But we must set the record straight, because she had a question she didn't answer. That we must set the record straight. This idea of imperial presidency that we try to impute on the BBI is an outright lie. And if there's proof about it, send it to me and compare it to Putin and other people who tried to extend their terms, including Yoweri Kaguta Museveni in Uganda. Compare and contrast and tell me. Number two, the idea of BBI is not one-sided. You cannot say we don't need a referendum because this certain issue that I'm very passionate about is not a constitutional thing. Then people in IT should say we should only have a referendum because we need to pass the right to security of our data and to privacy in our constitution. We cannot look at a document that has 240 pages and look at it in a piecemeal perspective.
Yeah.
It means that the people who have HELB loans should then only talk HELB loans, or the people who want there to be 35% into devolution should only talk about 35% into devolution. So we cannot sit on a national stage and take a very myopic and short-sighted and very individualistic view of a national document and say, because for me all I wanted was job jobs for youth and then say, I don't need a referendum. That's not how it works. Because you must look at the BBI document in totality, which is the responsibility of any adult in this country, because you're given the right to vote, to look at it holistically and ask ourselves, as we watched Kenyans plunder a lorry off of super glue, is that the kind of people we want?
Yes.
So when he talks
now
about
let's break it down further. Far from how we feel about how we are demonstrating our points, there's also some of the real issues that came out and some of the recommendations. For example, the establishment of an incubation center to provide business advisory services, including access to capital and government contracts, and of course making it easier when you have a loan, giving you a tax break. These are real things that people struggle with. So Gloria, when you see this, one would wonder, how would you not see them as solutions to some of the problems?
I absolutely see them as solutions, and I support them. But nothing is stopping the government as at now, how we are with the agencies that we have. You know, whether it is the agencies under the youth ministry, whether it is the agencies under... Actually, nothing is even stopping the government to go to the Kenya Revenue Authority and have them pass that we are going to have a tax. There's absolutely no barrier to start incubation centers. You get where I'm coming from? You can't tell me that I have to wait for you to pass a constitutional amendment or change, for you to empower me by setting up an incubation hub in Huduma centers. We already have Huduma centers. There is absolutely nothing stopping Joe Musheru and the Ministry of Youth to collaborate with those, intergovernmental agencies and talk about this is the youth agenda. By the way, that is their mandate. When you look at institutions as the National Youth Council, which exists, by the way, we have an institution called National Youth Council under the Ministry of Youth. When you come back to me with a document saying, Gloria, we are going to create another institution called the Youth Council, which is having the same mandate, that has the same service charter that the National Youth Council has. I'm confused because there's nothing stopping the government as it is now to deliver most of the things that the Building Bridges initiative is putting, including the tax breaks. The tax breaks for the youth, which, by the way, I support, but I keep on asking you, show me how many youth are at the early 20s, 20, 21, 22, who have businesses that will at least enjoy 5 years of that 7-year tax break. Most of these